For me, that just fills me up, just reminding these farmers who are so undervalued and so hardworking to just showcase that brilliance that they are. I was so excited after I shot these photos with her. I went straight back to the hotel, edited them, called her up. Samantha, I'm coming over. I got to show you these photos. And so we sat together, we were flipping through, and she started to have tears in her eyes. And she turned to me and she said, I didn't realize I was so powerful and beautiful. There's so much more that is embodied in a regenerative system that really takes into account community and connectivity and relationships. So are you as a farmer taking care of yourself and healthy? Because farmer suicide rates are through the roof. They're one of the highest professions that are committing suicide. Ironically, even though they're creating life and food. Looking at farmer mental health is a big important thing. Looking at community well-being and really that farm's potential to impact the entire ecosystem it's part of.
This episode of the Kintsugi Podcast is brought to you by Pause, Breathe, Reflect, which can help you bring mindfulness to your everyday moments. Hey there, my fellow like-hearted humans. It's Michael, and this is the Kintsugi Podcast. This week, we're going to play in the dirt. We're going to get grounded. And I know you're going to want to share this with everyone because we're going to talk about food, and who doesn't love to eat? This week, we're joined by a traveler. She's creative, she's curious. She's a surfer and a yogi and a former collegiate swimmer. I met her last year on retreat. She's an Aquarius, a Gemini rising. She's a photographer. And she's like-hearted, just like you. And with her camera, she becomes a storyteller. She tells the stories of farmers. And when you think about it, I can only speak for myself. I don't know many farmers. Sure, we might interact with some of the farmers at a farmer's market, but I don't really know their story. Well, this week's guest tells the story of the farmer with detail. You can really feel their energy, feel the love that they put forth as they grow their crops, as they put food on our table. In our Kintsugi spirit, they're making a connection with us and with the earth, and as a result, our nature. To know the stories of our farmers is to know who feeds us. And when we think about connection, the spirit of Kintsugi, isn't that what it's all about? Feeling connected to the things that nourish us. And nothing nourishes us like real food, grown by real people. That bag of Doritos, not nourishment. Calories, fat, carbs, yes to all that, but not nourishment. So we're going to get dirty. We're going to get grounded. We're going to connect with the story of farmers, as told through the lens of Leia Marasovich. So if you're ready, take a healthy breath in and a slow releasing breath out, and get to know Leia and the story of farmers. Hey, Leia. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's going to be a great conversation. So let's start here. How is your central nervous system today?
Great question. That's an important one to open with. Thanks for checking in. I would say in this moment, it is feeling, there's waves of exhilaration.
That's cool. Wow, I haven't heard that one before. I will take that. I will take that.
But after a full day of computer work yesterday, I got to go to the farm with my partner, who's a farmer, and just plant some seeds and get my hands in the soil. And that has set me on such a good pace for this morning, like just basking still in that grounding energy. So yeah, I'm feeling good and grounded.
That's awesome. Well, I know we're going to have a fantastic conversation because you're an Aquarius rising Gemini. So we're going to have...
Oh, you're good. Yep.
We're going to have some good conversation. So let's begin here for those that don't know who you are. We're going to take your profession and we're going to place it off to the side. So your role is all that you do, which we'll get into. But how would you describe yourself if you had to place your profession off to the side?
I would describe myself as a conduit of creativity that expresses itself in many different ways. So, beyond the labels of photography or videography, all these things, I feel like creativity is just something I'm constantly accessing and expressing, whether it's in the kitchen or how I communicate. So yeah, I feel like I'm just an expression of this source that we all have potential to tap into. And yeah, I just am full of ideas and inspiration. I get very inspired by my surroundings and people. So I feel like I just kind of reflect. I'm like a mirror in a way and just reflect the beauty and the creativity and the inspiration I see around me.
That is so cool. So for those listening, Leia and I met in Tuscany almost a year ago from where we're sitting down right now. And I would say my first impression of you there was that of a curious seeker, and you were so interested in the others showing up, and a traveler and a storyteller. And so you brought to the event such a good vibe. And I loved your story and the journey, as they would say, that you've been on. So I want to start there. Let's connect the dots to this point in time. So can you bring us back? And we'll go back to when you were a wee little one. And how did we end up here?
Love it. All right, let's do it. So I grew up in Los Angeles, but my family is from Croatia and Slovenia. So my parents immigrated and had me here. So I grew up already with a very kind of cross-cultural upbringing. Every summer we would go back home where all my family is. And, Croatia and Slovenia is part of former Yugoslavia, which was once one country, now it's two. So there's all these layers to identity that I've had growing up, which has been really interesting as a first generation. And I feel so grateful for those opportunities of being exposed to different cultures and people and places, which I feel like has really, formed me who I am today and my interests and how I move through the world. And so, yeah, being exposed to places like Europe where community and quality of food and life are really at the center. And then also being raised in a place like LA that has opportunity and ambition. It really was a dynamic upbringing where also I was raised between a very spiritual mother in one household and yoga and all that philosophy, Eastern philosophy. And then my father's household was a household of artists and intellectuals. And so, yeah, I had an amazing upbringing between these two dichotomies where I was constantly challenged in my thoughts and my worldviews because I was exposed to so many different ones and they all worked for each person, And so that just really, it's just something to acknowledge and honor. I'm really grateful for the abundance of diversity I was exposed to at a young age, from my own households to the countries that I'm from and have engaged with. And that all has led me down a deep passion for food and farming and sustainability in general, and how we also just community, because those are things I experienced often and valued in my upbringing, thanks to my amazing parents who instilled those important values. And it essentially led me down this path where I studied sustainability in college, had amazing opportunities to go and study and do research abroad in Central and South America, in the Amazon with indigenous communities. And then I started the farm at the university. And it was really since that moment of once I had my own hands involved in the soil and with seeds and growing food that I'm like, I can never not have this be part of my life. And I'm such a foodie and I love eating. So also just to honor, where our food comes from are the farmers. And it's such important, valuable work. And they are so underpaid and underrecognized in our current food system where we expect food to be so cheap and convenient, And so through that, we'll go now how I landed into my career from there. So I graduated, studying these things of farming and permaculture and urban planning type stuff. And then ended up back in Ecuador in the Amazon. I had studied abroad in Ecuador. And my best friend was making a documentary there about how globalization is impacting the local indigenous tribes. And I was like, you know what? It was like a full body of like, this is so important. It's probably the most important thing I can be doing in my life with like all my abilities and my health and resources. I need to go there and just support this mission. And so at the time I was working all these odd jobs in LA. I quit them all. I did a fundraiser, a yoga class, and raised $700. And I call up my friend and I say, what is the way I can use this money, for the community to benefit? And she said, the way you can create the most value would be to buy a camera and come down here and take photos while I'm filming. I was like, what? That's crazy. I don't want to spend the money on myself. I know nothing about photography. She's very convincing. So in 10 minutes, I was like already finding what camera I could afford. And so anyways, I bought a camera, a Canon Rebel, that was $700 and went down there. I'm learning how to turn it on in the jungle. I didn't watch any tutorials. I'm stubborn like that. I'm like, I'll figure it out. And I lived for about 3 months this documentary lifestyle where we were hosting cross-cultural exchanges between the tribes that the oil companies kept them intentionally separate, divide and conquer, or less powerful if they're separated. So she brought these communities together, which were neighboring communities, and one would show them their traditional dances, and the other would show their sacred water ceremonies and rituals. And I'm in the middle of this with the camera, capturing these very vulnerable, beautiful, profound moments of major transformation between these communities, and where they're realizing like, oh, wait, we can unite and we're similar And so that was the moment I fell in love with storytelling, where I was like, this found me through my passion of just committing to a purpose and a cause I truly cared about. And through that, my profession, my career was birthed. And so I came back home after those few months and printed the photos and did a whole thing. And then Rich and Julie, who we have mutual friends, I had known them for a few years. I was the nanny of their kiddos. And Srimati, Julie, was watching my journey and the photos I was posting. And she calls me up and she goes, Leia, I want to have a meeting with you. So we meet up. She's like, I'm watching your journey. You have an eye. I want to mentor you and I want you to photograph my cookbooks. She was about to actually just make one cookbook at the time. And I chuckled and I was like, okay, I just picked this up 3 months ago. By no means am I qualified and capable of shooting food, which is a very technical thing, And even Rich was like, yeah, we should hire a professional, but she just really believed in me the same way my friend Kumiko believed in me to be like, buy a camera. So there was something I myself wasn't even seeing here, but having people that had such strong conviction and faith in myself really pushed me to be like, let me rise to the occasion. And like, I'm up for the challenge. And I found so much joy with the camera. So I just was like, I'm going to keep exploring this. And I love a good challenge. So I ended up working with Shri for 2 years, photographing her amazing plant-based cookbooks, This Cheese is Nuts and Plant Power Way Italia. It was a delicious 2 years. I've tasted every recipe. It's amazing. And so that was really good training. I did food photography and, these white cheeses on a white background and very technical things. And she would hire a photographer one day where I just had an hour to ask them any questions. There was so much support and faith in that, which I'm so grateful for, all these women on my journey. It's why I'm here doing this today. So after those 2 years were done and we completed the books, I was craving to, just reconnect and be in a place that was a bit more raw and rugged. So I moved to Morocco. This is my Sagittarius side. I also have Sag in my moon.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So I was like, when I saw that, I was like, where is her Sagittarius in her profile? So this is where it's at. Very cool.
Oh, yeah. The adventurous travel. Yeah. So then I moved to Morocco and I got into surf photography. I was just getting into the surf world. I was a competitive swimmer my whole life. So it was a very fluid transition from swimming to surfing. And I had been a few years into it at this point, but I moved to one of the longest waves in Africa, this tiny remote village. It was amazing. And, world-class surfers from Europe and Australia would come there to surf. So I had the opportunity to document these amazing surfers and also the first female Moroccan surfer to really be on that global level. And that was shot for a TV series that was on one of the most popular Moroccan television stations. So for females to have that representation in the surf industry, I did all the water cinematography. All these opportunities kept filling my cup that I got through shooting because it was whatever I was interested to, I can reflect that. So anyways, long story long, Morocco ended after a year. I was at Rich and Julie's retreat in Italy, not ours, but 3 years ago prior. I think it was the second one we hosted.
Yeah, prior to the pandemic.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sitting there and I'm sitting next to Dr. Zach Bush, who I have no idea who he is. And we're talking about farming and all this stuff. And basically, he's like, I'm looking for someone to document farmer stories. And at this point with photography and video, I was really missing the farming side of my life. That was such a core importance of me. And I was like, this epiphany went on of wow, my two worlds can merge. I can actually document farmer stories. I thought about it. I wanted to do it, but I was like, how am I going to make a living out of that? So anyways, I get all my stuff from Morocco. I fly back home, and that was about going on 5 years ago. And I've been working here with Farmer's Footprint, documenting farmer stories ever since. And it's been amazing. So that's the full recap.
So beautiful. There's so much there that I would love to reflect back. Because what I heard, not to overuse farming analogies in our conversation.
Oh, let's go there.
But your parents created this rich soil, diverse and different perspectives, and I think planted the seeds of you being a curious traveler. And also what I heard is other people seeing you. We so need that in life in order to connect. So there's this grounding element, if we go back to Kintsugi, this grounding element of the soil, which we'll get into as we talk about the farmer's footprint, but also the need to be seen. Those women saw something special in you that you may not have seen at the moment or really didn't see at the moment. And you gave it enough space to let it unfold to see where it was going to take you. And I'm sure that there are moments of, what am I doing? Is this going to work out?
Oh yeah, always.
It's such a neat package, in a short podcast of well, this happened and this happened and this happened. It was so smooth and isn't it perfect and yada, yada, yada. But there are moments of doubt and what am I doing? And frustration and irritation and fear, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep on coming back to your grounding. And there's something really poetic, I think, for you as a surfer. So when I think of the mindfulness quality of equanimity, I think of a surfer. That's my first image.
I love that.
Because you know this better than I do, because I am not a surfer. But the waves of the ocean keep coming. Moments keep coming. Stress keeps coming. But we can find a way to surf, learn how to surf. And as you're surfing a wave, you're making micro adjustments the whole time in order to keep your balance or your harmony in check. And there's something just, meeting that moment, as chaotic as it can be, riding a wave, but with a certain amount of calm and serenity. And so I love that. And then ultimately, you're a type of person who is going to figure it out. You get this camera, you don't even know how to really turn it on. You're not checking YouTube. There's not tutorials you're tapping into, but you're going to find a way to make it work. And here we are. I think it's a beautiful story, Leia, of the importance of having the right grounding, the right soil, the right people around you who are planting seeds and then helping you fertilize those seeds to, again, to really pull through this whole farmer's analogy. I want to get into the photography. So you're brand new at this. How did you determine what your aesthetic or your approach was? Was it a lot of trial and error? Because what I see in the photos, and I can look at the Farmer's Footprint website, and farming is hard work. I remember just picking strawberries in the summertime with my mom as she would make jam. It's backbreaking work. And to your point that you made as you told your story, I think we forget that there are humans behind all of our food. There's a heart, there's hands, there's energy, and good food. Things that we call food that are engineered aren't really food, right? And there's someone like doing this work. It should disturb us when something costs $1 that we know shouldn't cost $1.
Right. Something or someone's being exploited in that process.
Something is fishy, right? So it's just not right. Like you shouldn't be able to buy a burger at a fast food joint. I'm not sure why you would want to eat that. I know some people will eat it because it is cheap, but it shouldn't be so cheap, right? So what I see in your photography is that you're bringing a different perspective to these farmers, these people that you shoot, because there's a lightness and an energy. And I really appreciate it because my perspective of farming, because I don't really know many farmers, I have a sort of a stereotypical view of what a farmer is, like a dude out in Kansas, riding a John Deere tractor. But you bring such light and vibrancy to the farmers. I'm just curious, how did you come to your aesthetic? How did you come to this way of doing your art and telling stories?
So things like documenting farming and indigenous communities, it's a fine line I struggle with. I mean, I guess documenting most things, of like trying to frame it in a way that is beautiful and really bringing out the beauty of the essence of that place and person. But with that comes the compromisers, or maybe it could be misleading, because I don't want to romanticize things that are dirty and messy, like farming, because you can see a beautiful farm photo and be like, wow, I want to be a farmer and live that life. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, this is a lot more intense than that photo showed. So I'm always, and with indigenous communities as well, which is like such a big, passion and devotion of mine, of storytelling, these things that, there can be beautiful portrayals. And also there's like these realities that I don't want to dismiss. Like a photo can't tell you everything. It could tell you a lot, but there's all these other contexts too. And so that's something I'm just walking the line of balancing. But I think there is something of reflecting beauty that, like, as humans, we are innately, like, we will be touched by beauty. And so that is really the core of, like, especially in documenting people, I really just want to connect to the beauty. I just see beauty through people all around all the time. It's kind of like just a lens I think I hold, and through that curiosity, And so I think through my style and aesthetic, that's kind of, I guess, what I'm just aiming to portray. And I think sometimes I'm a very process-oriented person, and other times I'm like, there's no process. It's just intuition, it's feeling. And I think I would say now, in talking about it, my style is connecting with the person and having them forget there's a camera even there. Because again, my stuff is very documentary style. I think that's like one of the biggest jobs of storytellers, is connecting from a human to human standpoint. And when that person feels comfortable with you, they will shine and show their true beauty and layers, all the layers there. And so that's really my secret. My trick is just connect with the subject, the thing, and then there's a camera on this side. But really, I'm just trying to engage with that person. And that's where so much comes out through.
What's it like when you first share the video and photos with those farmers? Because I imagine they haven't been photographed in the manner that you take.
Yeah.
They might be just privately doing their thing, just trying to make ends meet and put food on other people's tables. And here you come along and the Farmer's Footprint documenting their story, and you share these amazing photographs with them. How do they respond?
Yeah, I love this question because this is why I do what I do. So I'll share an example of an amazing farmer, Samantha Fox in North Carolina. And I was so excited after I shot these photos with her. I went straight back to the hotel, edited them, called her up. I said, Samantha, I'm coming over. I got to show you these photos. And so we sat together, we were flipping through, and she started to have tears in her eyes. And she turned to me and she said, I didn't realize I was so powerful and beautiful. And, for me, there's so many impacts and ripple effects of stories. But for me, that's one that I really just fills me up, and fills my cup when the person is just seeing themselves for the first time in a new way and reminding them of how, powerful and beautiful they are. And so, I think with farming, that is why I love stepping into the field and just reminding these farmers, like I mentioned earlier, who are so undervalued and so hardworking, to just showcase that brilliance that they are. And we've seen incredible impacts for the farmers too, in addition to just seeing themselves. But for their farms, like another farmer, Olivia, who's a mushroom farmer, she usually takes about 6 months to sell out of her mushrooms. And after doing her Meet a Farmer feature, which is an ongoing feature we have, she sold out in 24 hours.
Wow.
So it's incredible too, just the exposure when people see the human-centered story. Like you said, that's the analogy I always use. There's hands and hearts growing your food. And to just remember that and honor that and hear their journey of what inspired you to do this hard work that's so important, is really where we focus our storytelling in this space. Because I think we can all relate to another human experience, and it just tapping into that vulnerability just opens up, the way you'll look at what's on your dinner plate that night, So it's been incredible.
All right. This seems like a good time to take a pause, breathe, reflect break. And when we come back, Leia and I will talk further about her story and the story she tells at Farmer's Footprint. All right, let's take a break. Take a full breath in and a slow releasing breath out. And relax the body as you soak up our conversation. I hope that felt good. Okay, now that we're a little bit more relaxed, can we be real? I think our morning routines, they've gotten a little out of control. You might not have time in the morning to meditate because you're busy doing other things like trying to get to work or getting the kids off to school. And this is where my app, Pause, Breathe, Reflect, comes in, because I built it for busy people with a whole bunch of shorter practices. So if you don't have 10 minutes in the morning to meditate, cool beans. You're human after all. But I bet you have 5 times throughout the day when you have 2 minutes to practice and let go of stress and bring mindfulness to your everyday moments. So today, download Pause, Breathe, Reflect for free and begin to stress less, sleep better, and join a community of like-hearted humans rippling something worth rippling into the world. All right, let's go back to our conversation and celebrate the Kintsugi within us all. What I hear is that you help them see themselves differently, much like, the women in your life helped you when you were younger, right? Just like I see myself differently, and that changes the dialogue that we have with ourselves when others see us. We become even more powerful, right? So in the Kintsugi spirit, we allow all of our scars to shine as we step into our brilliance. And yeah, to your point, we can be more mindful. One way to practice mindfulness is through mindful eating. Really pay attention to what's on our plate and who's behind it. I'm not sure if you know the book, Thanks 1,000.
I don't.
So it's written by A.J. Jacobs. He's a quirky little fellow. He's not that little. I think he's actually taller than me, but he lives in New York City. So in his book, Thanks 1,000, he went on to thank everyone that had an impact or contribution to his morning latte
Oh my
at
gosh.
this coffee shop in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a chance to sit down with him, and he signed a whole bunch of copies of his book for my leadership academy. This was pre-pandemic. So he went on this mission to thank everyone at the coffee shop, the people behind the water, the people behind the cup, behind the lid, behind the cardboard sleeve that you put onto your coffee cup. He went down, I think, to Costa Rica to thank the farmers, people who do logistics, right? He ended up thanking nearly 1,000 people
Wow, for the one cup of coffee.
for the one
That's
latte he
amazing.
has every day on Amsterdam in Midtown Manhattan, or I think actually
Wow.
the Upper West Side. So it's that ability for us to, my language here, pause, take a breath, and reflect, and really pay attention to what's behind all of our food. And so what I love about your work is that you're really highlighting the people behind it and their farms in the communities that they're building. And, to a certain degree, our current debate here in this country with migrants coming into our country, I think we're losing sight of they're coming into our country and they're doing the jobs that a lot of people don't want to do. They're picking our fruits and vegetables, and they're working in those factories that make nutrition possible. And I think it's so easy because we live in such a fast-paced world to forget who's behind the things that we consume, we participate in. And so I love the beauty that you're bringing to your work. It's because when you see your photos, it's like you sort of want to hug them. There's an energy to these folks, and it's, for me, what I felt in my body was like this desire for the farmers markets, to open up and approach those farmers much differently than I have ever done in the past. I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
So Kintsugi is about connection, as we talked about before we hit record. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about regenerative farming. We hear the term like, oh, this is a regenerative farm, and it sounds good. It sort of sounds like organic. You're like, oh yeah, that's good. And like, we're down for that. But then if you had to ask someone, what is it? There would be maybe some mansplaining or some humming and hemming and hawing. And so conceptually, I get it, but I didn't know if you could put a little bit more flesh on the bones and really share with us what it is and how important it is, because I think it aligns perfectly to the spirit of Kintsugi, that we can use our whole ecosystem to heal and come back together.
Yeah, this is a big one, and it's starting to become a bit more mainstream, which, is great. But with that comes, I feel, a lot of simplification and watering down of concepts that are evolving and that are living and that are rooted in history and place. And so I would say regenerative agriculture is really an evolving spectrum of connecting and stewarding land in a way that is in reciprocity and relationship and community. And so, we can look at things, there's lists online of like, this is regenerative agriculture and it's cover crops and it's soil health. And those are all great. But instead of those being the standards, I feel like those are like the effects of really a farmer. I think it starts with internally with the farmer and each one of us in regenerating ourselves first. Because when we show up to a place or a farm, the way we're going to treat it is affected by who we are and how we're showing up. If we're angry, we're maybe going to take that out on the land or whatever. And so for me, like it all starts actually not in the soil, but with the individual. It's so deep, it's not just soil health.
It's the energy that we bring into the situation or the environment.
Yeah.
That might be seen as woo-woo in some circles, but that's real vibey stuff. We can pick up on our energy. And so if we come at it with angry energy, it's going to have an impact. Just as if we come at something with loving energy, it's going to have a different type of impact.
Yeah. I mean, I was just in Colombia with the Arhuacos community, and they had this reference they mentioned of like, when you're around pollution, you become pollution, And so I just think with farming, regenerative agriculture, all these things, there's definitely markers we look at of like, is this regenerating life? Is this creating life? Or is it degenerating? Is it killing? So things like chemicals and glyphosate, we definitely don't incorporate in regenerative agriculture because that is killing the soil, the microbiome, all these things. And so it's a system. And every day, if you ask me this question an hour from now, I'll have a different answer because it's so dynamic. But I'm trying to like condense it down. This is 5 years of visiting countless of farms across the country, all types of farms that I'm like, I accumulated a lot of just different perspectives and definitions of that I'm now like still processing and trying to explain in a concise way. But yeah, I think it's really a system that nourishes the land and feeds us at the same time, because in an organic system like the USDA certified organic, that's a great start. That means there's no chemicals, there's minimal chemicals, but overall, there's not a lot of chemicals involved. But you can still be consuming a ton of water. You can still be exploiting your workers. There could still be, unjust systems, even if you have amazing soil health and you're organic. So for me, it's like, that's a good like first step, but there's so much more that is embodied in a regenerative system that really takes into account community and connectivity and relationships. So are you as a farmer taking care of yourself and healthy? Because farmer suicide rates are through the roof. They're one of the highest professions that are committing suicide because these systems are so degenerative for them, ironically, even though they're creating life and food. And so, yeah, I think looking at farmer mental health is a big important thing, looking at community well-being and really that farm's potential to impact the entire ecosystem it's part of. It's not just the soil on your land. A regenerative system is impacting the migratory bird patterns in that area and the water flow and all these other nested holes your farm is part of. And so it's a really like holistic view of, the impact you're having on your land and on yourself and on your community.
Wow, incredible. Highly complex. You did a pretty good job of taking that like easy question for me to ask you, very difficult concept to explain in only a few minutes. And since it is so dynamic, I will come back to you in an hour. I'll send you a text and say, okay.
I'll have a new iteration.
So when I was riding my bike across the country in 2022, I rode through the heart of America. We went from Oregon to Washington, D.C. So I rode through all of our corn and all of our soybeans. And what I can only imagine are really like big ag. Although I say that, and I can say that sort of casually, but I don't know when ag becomes big ag. It just looks like a big farm.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, it's big ag. It's like they're evil. And
monocultures and yeah.
Yeah. I have no idea what constitutes big ag. But my thinking or feeling is that in farming, there's such great tradition. Like, this is the way we've done it.
Yeah.
And, my dad did it this way, and my grandfather did it this way, and sort of a patriarch analogy here, because at least that's the perspective I'm coming from, knowing that there is more diversity in farming today than probably there ever was. But just that notion of like, well, this is the way we're doing it. And what you're sharing and telling stories about are different ways. So in your work, what gives you hope, Leia, that we can help shift the perspective of those folks that maybe in a very traditional way of thinking about how farming should be? Because my hunch is that they're struggling as farmers. as they hold on to the old way at the very same time?
Yeah, amazing question. Our approach at Farmer's Footprint is first progress over perfection. Like, if you're not there, we're not going to not talk to you. It's like we got to meet people where they're at. And especially these multi-generational farmers who've just been trained in that way. It's just what they know. We can't blame them, you know? And so we really want to be an invitation and be like, where are you at? Everyone has the possibility to, work down this path of regeneration, and reminding people too, you'll never arrive. It's not like, oh, I did it. I checked all the boxes. I'm here. We're good. No, this is like, we're setting up the stage for future generations to continue this work and continue improving, because regeneration is multi-generational work. We can take actions today, each individually, whether we're farmers or not. We're eaters, right? So we're part of the food system 3 times a day or however many times a day. So everyone has a role to play in this. But back to the farmer question. Yeah, with the conventional systems, I think what gives me hope, well, there's so many amazing stories of transition that I've documented, of seeing things that I would be like, it is impossible to embody regenerative principles in this like mega 1,000-acre farm because of the scale and just what's been done already on this land. But I've seen time and time again amazing success stories of these farmers starting to transition, incorporating animals, incorporating cover crops. Like, there are such accessible ways they can start integrating these principles. And not that it's easy, and it takes time. And I think, just to name, in these capitalist systems, we really have to acknowledge the dichotomy there, because in a truly regenerative approach that stems from ancestral indigenous ways of farming, like you mentioned, it wasn't ever in this capitalist structure where we were monetizing nature. It was like, we would grow food, we would share it. There would be someone with the chickens and the kale and, kind of that ecology, where now we're trying to commodify and measure success on yields, not even take into account nutrient density. And so it's a different system. We're now trying to incorporate these ancestral indigenous ways, and there's a bit of a clash there. But through the restraining forces, there's an opportunity for many possibilities to arise. So I don't see these restraining forces as negative. I see them as necessary for reconciliation and new ways of moving forward. And so I get really excited in encouraging people to tap into their own imagination and tap into just, this essence of hope. And that's really what we're rooted in at Farmer's Footprint, is sharing these stories of hope. Because what we found is that when a farmer sees another farmer who is just one step ahead of them, they are going to make that transition and make that first step, versus like someone who's already got it all dialed and like crushing it. So I get hope in all the farmers I meet across the country, and now going a bit out more into the world, who are really so committed to doing this and finding innovative ways that works for their place, because regenerative agriculture is so place-based and context-specific. And really, for me, another big factor is honoring cultural traditions, cooking traditions, all these things. And so there's not one size that fits all. And I think that's where I get inspired, is seeing the beauty of diversity that emerges when you are in deep relationship with your place and your culture and your community, because all these new expressions arise from there.
I love it. It's like medicine. What I love about your share is that it really does parallel or match up well with my approach when it comes to mindfulness and meditation. It's just one little step forward, or around growth, if you will. If we see someone like our neighbor or a colleague doing something and we just take that one extra step, I do think we tend to over-index on the people who are crushing it. Those are the big names, the iconic names, the celebrity. And I think they're needed because they can help us see what may be at the pinnacle for the sake of conversation. But I think seeing those people around us who are taking those little steps, because that's how we bring about change, little steps consistently over time, we can climb the mountain together. And I think that's what you're doing with your work, which is fantastic. And I have one last question for you. We'll get you out on this one. All right. So we're going to assume that God exists.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what your religious preference or status is, but let's just say God exists. And this is a question from a show that was airing many moons ago called Inside the Actor Studio. And James Lipton, he would bring actors and actresses on. It was filmed in New York City in front of a crowd at FIT. They were all acting students. And so he would bring the Tom Hanks and others in to do the interview. And so he'd ask this question at the end of the interview. Assuming that God exists and you get to the end of your life and you go up to heaven and you meet God, what would you like God to say to you when you meet them for the first time?
Wow, I never thought about that one. My disruptor in me is like, I don't have an expectation what God will tell me. Just tell me what I need to hear.
I like it. That's cool.
You know, I'm like, I don't want to, there's an expectation there of what he would tell me. So I'm just like, man, I would just love to know what he would want to tell me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to, I'm like having a restraining force in answering that. But it's a really interesting thing to think about. And I'm going to keep thinking on that. And maybe when I answer the what is regen ag in an hour, I'll also answer that one too.
Yeah, you can be part 2 of the response back. So I love your answer. That I was like, I got to sit with it a little bit longer. What I like about the question is it is the ultimate begin with the end in mind type of question. Like what type of ripple you want to put into the world. Whatever you might think about religion and God and that relationship. But when it's all said and done, at least in this physical being that we all travel in, what kind of ripple do you want to put into the world? You know, how do you want to help people connect? And how do you want to celebrate others and celebrate yourself? And so we can live with some intentionality and some thoughtfulness as we go. And, you know, to me, Kintsugi is about seeing that we break along the way. It's hard work, this thing called life, but we can find a way to come back together, reconnect, heal, and celebrate.
Regenerate.
Yeah. And celebrate our scars as golden symbols of our strength. And I think, actually, I know you're doing just that. So the life that you're creating, Leia, and the work you're doing is helping us see the Kintsugi in so many people that are often invisible to us. You help us see others. And that is a beautiful ripple you're putting into the world. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that.
Thanks for being on.
I think it came to me, what I would like God to tell me is like, hey, guess what? The humans thing, they stopped the war thing that they were doing. Like we've moved on, we've evolved.
I like that.
Because that to me is still like, how are we still here?
Yes.
So maybe that God's just like, yeah, no more war.
No more war. That would be great. That's one of my dreams, a more peaceful planet. So stop the war, tap into our prefrontal cortex and be able to say we don't need to fight so much anymore. Ripple a little bit more love and a little bit less hate. So thanks again for being on. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Michael. Good to see you.
Great to see you too. Don't you just love her energy? Love her vibe. I can totally see the Aquarius and Gemini in her. And if you're a little iffy on the whole astrology thing, that's cool. Everyone's welcome to their own perspective. But I will say this, if the moon can move the oceans, don't you think it has some impact on us? Just putting it out there. If something that Leia shared resonated with you, I'll encourage you to reach out to her, or you can reach out to me and I'll pass it along. I'll put in the show notes all the links to connect with Leia and the Farmer's Footprint. And I hope you'll check them out and be involved. So you can also tell the story of our farmers who nourish us each and every day, multiple times a day. I know your time is your most precious resource, so I am forever grateful you decided to carve out some time to join us here on the Kintsugi Podcast. And if you haven't already done so, I would love a kind review and rating wherever you happen to listen to your podcast. Leaving a rating, as well as sharing this with your friends, is one way to overcome the algorithm that we all deal with in life. It's one way to send a beautiful ripple into the world, and Leia is putting a beautiful ripple in the world that deserves to be shared. And if you want to stay connected with me throughout the week, you can subscribe to my weekly newsletter called The Ripple Effect. All you need to do is go to michaelobrienshift.com and sign up there. And I drop a gem into your inbox each week to help you navigate life with more ease and prevent a bad moment from turning into a bad day. And one final thing, if you haven't yet become a member of our Pause, Breathe, Reflect community, I'll encourage you to do so, because it's more than just an app. It's a group of like-hearted humans looking to be better humans to other humans, and you also get coaching from little old me on how you can live more mindfully. Because I want to make mindfulness accessible to everyone, so I hope you'll join us. And again, thanks for being here. I also want to thank the good people at SassPod who make the Kintsugi Podcast possible. Thank you so much for helping us put a beautiful ripple into the world. And between now and next week's story of connection, I invite you to take a moment to pause, breathe, reflect as you sit down for your meals and express some gratitude for farmers everywhere, all the farmers that nourish you. And remember, if you run into a challenging moment, slow it down, come back to your breath, and know that you've got this and we've got you. And together we'll put a beautiful ripple into the world. Thanks again for being here. I love that you are.